Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today is this month's patron pick. Thank you so much to all of my wonderful supporters on Patreon. This time around, we had a rare tie in the voting, so I decided I would cast the winning vote myself. Be sure to let me know in the comments whether you would have rather seen me talk about Selvala plus Panaglacial Worm. The topic I'll be covering instead today is the economics of judging. If you've ever wondered how much money judges make, or how we make events work financially, I'll be talking about that in detail using some recent events that I worked at as a case study. And as a special treat for sticking around or being intelligent enough to skip to the timestamp that's probably in the top comment, I'll also reveal how much money I make from my other revenue sources such as YouTube and Patreon. Ready? Let's get started. I'll begin with store level events because those are the easiest. Basically, there's no standard rate. It's just whatever you can negotiate with the store. Sometimes the judge will be a store employee, and judging is just one of the expectations of their job. Other times, the store will have an agreement with one of their players to handle rules calls at events like pre-releases and FNMs. At more serious events like an RCQ, the judge cannot participate as a player, which means that if it's not being handled by a store employee, judging will generally be performed by someone who's specifically there to do that job. Now, if you're playing in the event and planning to be there anyway, a lot of people are happy to help out in exchange for some nominal compensation like free entry into the event or some snack and drink privileges. But I wouldn't expect any judge to show up for close to a full day without something more serious. Sometimes larger stores or ones hosting larger events will actively solicit judges and publish the rates that they're offering. In a lot of cases, though, there's just one judge working with the store, and the rates are based on whatever agreement those two parties came up with. I'll tell you that when I judge an event like this, I usually ask for 1 to 2 boxes of current standard play boosters, depending on how far I have to drive. In fact, almost all of the boxes behind me came from judging RCQs or similar store-level events. Some judges only accept cash or work out a deal for store credit. I like boxes since it effectively lets the store pay me extra, since there's a gap between how much the store pays for a box of booster packs and how much you can sell them for. Regarding the expenses for such an event, my general expectation is that these are single-day affairs, meaning there's no expenses associated with lodging. Anytime I judge a store-level event, I ask that some form of meal be provided as part of my compensation, so there's no food expenses either. This means the only cost to pay for is transportation. Depending on how little a judge values free time, this could mean judging events relatively far away from home can be viable. My normal radius for judging in stores is around a 1 to 2 hour drive. The next step up from an all-day store event is generally judging at a multi-day event hosted by a professional tournament organizer. In the past, such organizers occasionally ran single-day events too, such as Pro Tour qualifiers and state championships, but these days, most of the events I see professional TOs running span both days of the weekend, oftentimes spilling onto Friday also. As the scale of the event grows, you naturally expect higher levels of compensation to attract a medium to large number of judges, many of whom come from much further away, since the number of judges who live in any given area is generally insufficient to manage an event of this size. For this video, I'll discuss my experiences at the SCGCon run by Star City Games in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago. First up, I know that a lot of people are interested in how to get on the judge staff for events like this, and the process is a bit different from judging at a store, where most of the connections come from basic word-of-mouth networking. In the past, there was a website called Judge Apps, which most organizers used to solicit staff. These days, most of them have moved to a model where people apply for events by filling out a Google form that's posted in the organizer's Discord server, and communication is facilitated by adding staff to an event-specific channel. So if you're interested in applying to an event, find out who's running it and join their Discord. Here's the application page for SCG Cincinnati. You've got the standard stuff where you fill out your name and other info, and as you can see here, as a floor judge, I made $275 per day. I worked all 3, so that means I made $825. Now that's pretty good for just 3 days work, better than I make at my normal job actually, but of course that's because we're talking about revenue, not profit. The way Magic staffing typically works is that you get one flat fee and all your expenses are expected to come out of that. Sometimes for bigger events, an organizer will offer travel sponsorships for judging traveling from farther away to make it easier for them to attend. But, well, let's just say I wouldn't expect to get one of those for an event that's only a 3-hour drive away anyway. So, with that said, we know that I'm going to have to travel to Cincinnati, book a hotel room, and sustain myself for 3 days, all out of my own pocket. And naturally, that's going to count against the $825 figure mentioned earlier. Well, how much would all that cost me? From experience, I know that my expenses for the trips often fall into one of those 3 categories: transportation, lodging, and food, which I'll talk about in turn. Before that, though, maybe there's another category that I should touch on because I'm not going to be covering it: entertainment. The fact is, when I'm on these trips, I don't spend a lot of money on entertainment. Cincinnati isn't really a city with a bunch of spendy entertainment options, but even when I do go for stuff like MagicCon Amsterdam this summer, I'm not planning on doing anything special outside the con. I'm just a boring guy, and usually spending a whole day on the show floor is enough stimulation for me. By the end of the weekend, I'm pretty well tapped out. In any case, I don't think entertainment expenses should really count when you're doing calculations for whether to go to an event like this. After all, these expenses are wholly optional. You could always find something to do for free in your hotel room or in the convention center. Now, what's not optional is a hotel room. Even in my most value-grubbing early days as a Magic player, I never tried to sleep in my car. My standards for hotels have actually increased as I've gotten older, and so, of course, this is the sort of expense that can be highly variable. A major theme in trip planning is the trade-off between cost and convenience, and hotels span a wide range along the spectrum. I don't have any general advice other than to shop around and try new things, even ones that might be a little bit outside your comfort zone. After the event, evaluate whether you think the trade-off was worth it. Now, when I'm driving to events, I usually look for a mid-tier option around a 10 to 15 minute drive away from the convention center, which is what I did for Cincinnati. I ended up paying $243 for 2 nights at a Holiday Inn in a suburb just over the river, checking in Friday night and checking out Sunday. I will say that hotels in Cincinnati this weekend were insultingly expensive for no discernible reason, so I consider this figure a bit high, but maybe that's just inflation. Next up, we have transportation. Now, I already mentioned that I drove for this event, and being realistic, I think that was really the only option that made sense. I guess I hypothetically could take a plane or maybe a nice 8-hour bus ride. To try to be a little bit more scientific, I filled up immediately before and after my trip, and the total amount that I spent on gas this time was $40. I drive a newer car and averaged around 40 to 45 miles per gallon driving there and back. I understand that the USA has generally got pretty low gas prices, my area in particular, but gas prices have been generally pretty high lately, so this is probably about $10 more than I was accustomed to spending on this particular segment of my budget. And then there's parking. This is always my least favorite part to pay for because you're basically paying for nothing. It always feels like such a ripoff, and Cincinnati is no exception. I ended up paying a total of $47 for parking, including $10 on Sunday, which I consider particularly egregious because most cities in the Midwest, including nearby Columbus, Indy, and Louisville, do not charge for parking on the street on Sundays. Judges' call times are almost always early enough in the day that they can get a spot within a couple blocks of the convention center, so I almost never have to pay anything on day 3 of an event. It doesn't help that the older, smaller venue that SEG used to use when they went to Cincinnati had a parking lot attached, allowing everyone to park for free on all the days. But anyway, that's enough of me whining. In any case, $90 is how much I spent on transportation this time. Last up is food. Judges do get breaks, typically an hour around lunchtime and maybe another half hour sometime later in the day. And since most judges spend most of their day standing, walking, and thinking, it's important to spend some of your time off shift getting food. Now, that said, I would rather starve myself than pay $10 for a hot dog, so I generally don't consider the convention center food court as an option except in dire circumstances. One benefit of prior experience working in the same convention center is that you have a head start on the quest of finding more reasonable offerings. I had previously identified this Chipotle as the best value to quality ratio nearby, and it's a few minutes walk from the convention center, so I headed right over. My hotel stay included breakfast, so I wasn't very hungry around lunchtime, meaning a $10 carnitas burrito was enough food to satisfy me for lunch and dinner with some left over for a pick-me-up to keep my energy up throughout my shift. And that's about it. Out of the $825 that I got paid for this event, I ended up pocketing $465, which works out to $155 each day. I would say that's pretty representative of what I would expect to make from a local event like that SCG. Obviously, the numbers don't look as good as they did before I took all my expenses out, but as you can see, there's still plenty left if you wanted to splurge and do a nice night out or some exploring while you're there. Now let's have a look at how I did on my trip to Las Vegas at the beginning of this month. MagicCons are all organized by a company called Pastimes, and if you search for Pastime Staffing, you can find all this information right on their website. As you can see, floor judges get $250 per day, and on top of that, there's another $175 as a hotel stipend, so $425 per day. I worked all 3 days, which means an additional $175 of hotel stipend, and I was also a team lead for one of those days, so my compensation on that day was $125 more. All in, my top line income for this event was $1,575 for 3 days worked. All right, so we can see that There's a lot bigger payout when we're talking about this sort of event because this is a huge event, meaning they need way more judges and other staff to make it happen. Because many staff members, including myself, will be coming from much farther away. Their average expenses are much higher. How much higher? Well, we'll take a look at the same three categories of expenses, starting with transportation, because that's the one that's changed the most. I did not drive to Vegas. That would have been 2 14-hour days of just driving. No chance I'm even considering that. I flew. Unfortunately, my flight this time around was not a good representation of how much that cost me because I had a short vacation in Hawaii that I scheduled so that I could put it on the same flight as my trip to Vegas. The closure of Spirit Airlines, which was my preferred carrier to my previous trips to Vegas, also complicated things. Based on my experience and the price of a flight to just Las Vegas a couple of months from now, I'd say $300 to $400 is a fair estimate for what this part of my trip would have cost me in normal circumstances. From check-in Thursday to check-out Sunday, my hotel was about $500. Because I didn't have access to a car, I chose one within walking distance of the venue. If I was going to describe the Mardi Gras in one word, I would go with adequate. Honestly, its best feature is costing $500 for 3 nights and being close to the convention center. Being walking distance from the convention center had another good benefit too, which is that convention centers typically don't allow outside food in. But if you want to go back from the convention center to your hotel, there's no way for them to stop you from eating there. This being the case, before the con started, I went to a grocery store and bought some food at some somewhat normal prices so that I could do just that. I probably went in for about $30 total, which is obviously way less for way more than what I would have had to spend without this tactic. But then you also have to consider the time that I spent going out of my way to pick this up. And speaking of, you might be wondering how I did this without a car. The answer is I had to buy a bus pass, which is the same way that I made the trip from the airport to the hotel on the way in and the reverse trek on the way out. While this was obviously much cheaper than taking a taxi or a rideshare or something, it wasn't free and it ended up spending about $20 on transit. There was one more travel money saving hack that I employed, which is that unlike in Cincy, I was able to get a roommate for this trip, so my hotel expenses were actually half of what I said earlier. Just one more reason why magic is better with friends. So that's how much judges make. I hope that was interesting for you, and maybe if you were on the fence about whether judging or another event staff position might be something that you'd like to try, this gives you some more insight into what it takes to make it work financially. As you can see, judging does indeed pay well so that you can generally expect a trip to pay for itself, at least if you're going to a large-scale show or a local show that doesn't take a lot of money to travel to. But, that's not the only way that I make money from judging. I mean, the events are nice and all, but being a big shot celebrity is where all the real money is, right? Well, you waited patiently or intelligently clicked on a timestamp, so I feel like I owe it to you to answer this one plainly. At the time of publication, I had about 30,000 subscribers, and my videos in the past few months have typically been getting between 5 and 10,000 views. So here's what that got me. Be prepared to be jealous. Yeah, it's about $100 to $200 a month. To be fair, it did used to be more. Ever since I moved to making longer form videos once a week instead of shorter videos 3 times a week, my revenue is down by a little less than half. Part of this is due to the less uploads, but it's also because some of my experimental videos outside my normal DDRs, such as History of Magic and Magic from Zero, have not been as popular as I was hoping they would be. If you want fat stacks of cash like you saw in the thumbnail, I'd recommend engineering. Which is good, because as long as I've still got that, I can continue to run this channel the way that I have been, with absolutely no regard for how much money it makes. I got a very encouraging comment last week appreciating how my channel hasn't yet devolved into an algorithm-serving slop pile, and I'm happy to say that's a direct consequence of not trying to turn Judging for the Win into my full-time job. I have total freedom to avoid things that I find artistically abhorrent, and I've no doubt that if I sold out my channel a little bit more, I could probably be about twice as big as I am and be making a lot more money off of it. But I'm not interested because my goal isn't to have the most numbers, it's to have the highest value videos. To me, the Patreon earnings are what really tells the story. Unlike YouTube, my earnings here have consistently gone up slowly but surely since I opened the Patreon about 5 years ago. This tells me that I'm doing things right, and people are consciously choosing to support my work as a result. That feeling, the knowledge that there are people out there supporting me because they believe in what I'm doing and they agree that my videos are making the world a better place, is more valuable to me than the money. The same thing is true for me judging. Having a few $100 at the end of the weekend is great and all, but honestly, I'm at the point in my life where that's about on par with the value I place on getting to stay home and unwind for a few days. The thing that really pushes it over the top is all of you. Every time I meet a fan and they tell me that they like my videos, that's the real reward. If you saw me at Vegas or Cincinnati, you probably already know that I keep a pocket full of these Judging for the Win branded tokens to give out to fans who come up and say hi. These cost me about a quarter a piece to make up, not counting how much I paid for the artwork, and I go through about 30 or 40 of them in a normal day of judging. I'm happy to spend 20 to 30 bucks out of pocket at every tournament I go to because having a chance to show my appreciation to fans in a tangible way and create a fun memory is easily worth it for me. And if you want some of those tokens, I ship out a full set of 6 to all of my patrons every year, and there's even a You Make the Token event where one of the tokens gets made according to polls, which is going on right now. Stay tuned for the concept artwork voting for the double-sided copy token, which will be the next stage. It's not enough, but I like to try to show my appreciation for the patrons too. That's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.